Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Yes, we're talking about a Gibson. Yes, we're talking about a Les Paul. And yes, it's acoustic. Weird. Hey folks, thanks for joining me. Yes, we're talking about Gibson Les Paul Acoustic. Would you believe it? This is like an interesting guitar. So let's get into those details. Before we jump into it though, hit that subscribe button for me and the like button, because those two things will really help out the channel to grow and stuff like that. That'd be super cool of you. Now, this is a Gibson Les Paul custom shop. It happens to also be acoustic, but it's not the first time Gibson experimented with an acoustic Les Paul. No, because many years before Fender came up with their Acoustasonic idea, or even their Teleacoustic or their Stratacoustic, you remember them? They were awful. I'm sorry if you love them, but I thought they were awful. Anyway, way back in 1969, when Bryan Adams was having that summer he'd write a song about years later, Gibson were coming up with the Les Paul Jumbo, which looked like this. Which doesn't look like a Les Paul at all. But hey, the SG didn't look like a Les Paul, but they stuck his name on that too. But you can see the kind of what they did here is the opposite of what they did with the actual Les Paul Acoustic, which came 30 years later. You have an acoustic guitar, they've slapped in some pickups, they've slapped in some control knobs, and they've gone, there you go. That's a Les Paul Acoustic Jumbo thingy. Thumb bleeders, I think, are a nice touch. I like that. It actually made me laugh, but there you go. So that was 1969. They ran those until 1973. As far as I can tell, they were not very popular. I think they were quite expensive back in the day. And if you wanted a Les Paul, you bought a Les Paul, and that was that. So anyway, roll on 31 years later, the Gibson Custom Shop is still kind of, I suppose, in its infancy, about what, 7-8 years after it got started officially. And then you have they're trying to do some different things. And like Gibson could do that today, do some different things, and we'd all be like, wow, look at Gibson being all amazing. Instead, they're doing like reissues of things. But anyway, they started making this guitar, the Gibson Les Paul Acoustic. Now, it's a very interesting guitar, and they did some interesting things. For example, let me show you the finish translucent blue. Look at this, it's a cool guitar, but you will notice there are no controls on the front of this guitar. In fact, those are up on the top shoulder, as I would like to say, but Gibson called it the rim. So it's on the controls are on the rim. Okay, but look, it's like a metal plate with some dials on it. It looks very 1970s, not the year 2000. You wouldn't mix it up with like the hoverboards and flying cars that we were expecting to have in the year 2000, because we didn't get those, but we got one of these instead, so all right then. But yeah, it looked a bit, whatever, like the controls just look very 70s if you ask me. Anyway, roll on a couple of years, 2003, when they stopped making these guitars. The final year of production had control knobs and volume knobs on the front, and thumb bleeders as well, because you know, you need a good thumb bleeder every now and then. But those were a little bit more Les Paul looking, I think. I think they looked a little bit more cool. I mean, either way they look weird, but in a good way. And that translucent blue was great. So there was another color, translucent black, which I couldn't actually find a really good picture of, so I didn't make one up or anything. Those are Tangerine Burst is the other one. Let me give you a rundown of the specs of the guitar. So you had a mahogany body with a highly figured maple top, mahogany neck, 22 fret rosewood fretboard, pearloid trapezoid inlays, vintage style Gibson Deluxe tuners, a Gibson SST electronics system alongside an LR Bags piezo system, and of course, as I said, those early editions had a slightly different routing to them because of the pickups the controls being in the wrong place. I mean, being in the other place. Yeah, and those were those guitars, and they're very rare and they're very interesting and very cool. And I would encourage the Gibson people to start making weird, cool stuff again. That'd be great. Stop just making stuff from the 50s and reissuing those. Just make, I mean, that's cool, but do stuff like this as well. Back in 2000 and 2003, in that kind of 3-4 year period, you would have spent 5,600 of your US dollars on one of these bad boys right here, which, I mean, that's amazing. Great guitar, but that's a lot of money for one of these. It was a custom shop, special edition, all that sort of stuff. If you want to pick one up now, you're going to spend the best part of $10,000, but you'll have something very rare. Like, nobody's going to walk in to a jam session with one of these, so you're by yourself. If you're playing somewhere, no one ain't going to have one of these. Interestingly, if you were interested in the Les Paul Jumbo that I showed earlier from 1969 to 1973, those cost about 10 grand as well. So yeah, if you got 10 grand lying around and you want an acoustic Les Paul, there you go. There's two different options for you. One of them's an actual Les Paul, one of them's not. Anyway, let me know what you think of these guitars in the description below, or not in the description, the comment section below. Hit that like button if you're cool, and I will see you again for another guitar related video very soon. But until then, take care.